Welcome to a demonstration of the AIMMS IBP application. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'd like to give you a deep understanding of the functionality of this tool and to help you understand what kind of use cases and problems it can help you address. And at the same time, I'd like to bring to the forefront the ease of use and workflow of the tool that makes achieving those use cases extremely intuitive and straightforward. In order to bring the functionality of the tool to life, we'll use a fictional CPG company that is mainly in the business of hair care products. Now, of course, just by the way in which you design the input data set, you can reflect any type of supply chain that you want to. So please use this fictional company as just an example, and it's purely to bring the functionality of the tool to life. So our IBP tool really has the purpose in a nutshell of orchestrating your end-to-end supply chain operation planning process, which typically includes a demand plan phase where the respective or the relevant demand planner, the individual planner from the business, can get overview of their demand plan and make adjustments to it at various aggregation levels. The second demand review phase allows the demand manager to validate that plan and also create any potential demand scenarios. The third phase allows you to create supply scenarios and then also obviously start balancing your supply to demand. So that's where the key optimization elements of the tool come to the forefront. And finally, the ability to compare those multiple scenarios, understand the trade-offs, and really figure out what is the optimal production plan at a tactical level for you. So let's start ahead with the first phase, the demand plan. And we are going to enter it as the basic hair product sales manager. So as you can see, firstly, the demand plan phase allows you to understand what is your planning calendar. And of course, this is all editable using the filters and some high-level metrics for this particular demand planner. I won't go into too much detail of this, but the really crucial part occurs in the demand plan phase, where you can start visualizing and understanding your forecast at various levels of aggregation. And the tool allows you to edit those forecasts whenever you see it being relevant. By the way, the forecasts in this tool can come either through your own forecasting application, or AIMMS also has a demand forecasting tool, which essentially feed into the IBP application. So as you can see, there are a few metrics that you can choose to show yourself based on what's relevant for your business. In this case, we can see the statistical forecast, the budget, and some other key numbers such as let's hover over this, the actual demand for that month, so for the previous month. Now you could see there are a few indexes here. So your customer, the location the customer is at, and the product that is demanded, as well as the forecast. And we could see for September 2020, if we look at this, assume that 2020 is the planning cycle. There is a certain demand for the e-commerce product at this overall customer group. Now, if we make a change here, let's say this number is adjusted to 600,000. What happens is that change is proportionately applied to every product in this specific product group and this customer group. So now if I switch the filter or the level from all customers to the unique customers, we can start visualizing how the demand for the unique customers have proportionately changed as well. So in a high level, that is the logic behind how these demand adjustments could work. And obviously you could keep leveraging the filters to really dive into the product and customer or location that you truly care about. You could obviously also understand the high-level summary after you've made multiple changes. That makes it very easy for you to understand all the changes that have been made and put it into a larger perspective. Now, let's say this phase is completed. The various individual planners have made their relevant respective changes. Then we can start the second phase, which is for the demand planner. or the demand manager in this case. So if we start understanding the second phase of the tool, the idea is essentially the same. First of all, to allow the demand manager to make changes or to overwrite any changes based on his or her latest understanding of the market, and also the ability to see the relevant metrics. In this case, you're seeing a revenue metric, which might be relevant for this specific person. And once again, I really want to make it clear that the numbers you see here, the names you see here, the types of charts that you visualize, that's all dependent on how you design the input template. So you can really reflect any supply chain quite easily in the tool. You can also get then a perspective of a high-level summary of all the changes that have been made. And perhaps most crucially in this phase, the ability to create different, what we call demand vulnerabilities or opportunities. So let's assume that the demand manager sees that there could be an opportunity of an increased online channel demand. And that could be for any reason, and the description should be made in best practice, relevant enough to capture the actual reason. Now we can select that this demand increase is going to affect the online customer channel, and let's say it affects all the all the locations for all the products, and we're going to see a increase in volume. Now, by selecting these filters, the specific data points related to these filters have shown up, and we can make a change to these demand values, either at a percentage level or an absolute value. So let's say that for the next few months, there is going to be a 20% increase in demand. So again, the change has been accounted for, and the demand has been proportionately adjusted on the different levels of aggregation that we have modeled. You can also start capturing a detailed action list or assumptions. If you're making many changes, that makes it quite easy because it's time-stamped as well, for you to understand exactly the decisions you have made for the various different scenarios that you're creating. Now, of course, you could create multiple different scenarios just by going here and saying, I want to create more demand vulnerabilities and opportunities. And I'll show you very quickly how these can be used to run detailed scenarios in the next section or next phase of this tool. Again, you can get a high-level summary of the vulnerabilities and opportunities that you have created. And finally, you have the chance to use this to create actual scenarios. So obviously, we have the base demand plan, and there is a demand opportunity in this case that's created. You can quite easily go here and say, I want to create a new demand scenario. And let's just call it a testing scenario, which includes this increase online demand change. So you can now start understanding, once you have various different vulnerabilities and opportunities, you could create multiple scenarios, demand scenarios, which could be a combination of each of them or different parts of them. So in other words, you could say, well, not only is the online demand going to increase, but at the same time, the profit margins, we expect that to decrease for another product group. So how should we behave under those implications? Now, let's assume that the multiple demand scenarios have been created, so we can start going into the next phase of the tool, which is the supply phase. So we go to supply review. Before I show you this part, let me show you firstly supply VNO. The logic becomes exactly the same. So let's say we want to create a vulnerability in this case of machine stoppages at certain locations. So let's say that the bottle line at the various locations will actually have fewer number of lines available. So you can see each of these locations has around 8 lines available, but what we want to say is that I'll change the fixed value for a couple months by 4. So now the utilization or the capacity available has essentially been halved at these bottling lines at the different locations for these 2 months. Now, if we go into create business scenario, this is really where the balancing between your supply and the demand comes to play. So we can firstly run a base demand plan where we allow overutilization. So the various warehouses that we can actually see here. So there are five production facilities, beg your pardon, in Ankara, Ghent, Ganzhou, Krakow, and Toulouse. And each of these locations have different types of production lines available at them. So we're allowing overutilization at those lines. We are not allowing unfulfilled demand. So we are forcing the tool to meet the full demand of your business. We have enabled capacity smoothing, which lets the tool know that it can build inventory beforehand to accommodate higher demand in the future periods. And we are enforcing strict maximum inventory limits, which cannot be exceeded for certain plans for certain months. So if I go ahead and hit the optimize button, in the background, a solver has been engaged. All the data is stored in a MySQL database, which is also accessed. And on top of that, all of these different relaxing or enforcing of constraints has been taken into account as well. And with that, we reach a certain output or a certain production plan. The way to interpret this is that at Toulouse, both of the lines are running at pretty good capacity for the entire 30 periods that we have modeled. If we click on one of these nodes, the table below adjusts to give us further period by period information. So we could see the mixing line in Toulouse has a capacity of 912 hours and an actual production of 912 as well, because we've limited the utilization to 95%. We have told the application not to exceed that when applicable. But at the same time, we have certain other locations like Ganzhou, where the capacity far exceeds the available production for many of the months, letting us know that in order for us to be truly optimal, we might need to overutilize some of these facilities for some of the months. And the yellow nodes let us know that we're actually well under utilizing these locations. So if relevant and if possible to have different lines at these different locations, it might be worthwhile to start using them to alleviate some of the pressure felt by these other bottlenecked resources. At the same time, you get a detailed inventory output that lets you know month by month or whatever periods you have defined, how much inventory you should keep in stock in order to accommodate the changing demand for the many different months. You also get a detailed production plan. Any of these tables you can download using this button as an Excel file for any further data manipulation or create your own visualizations on top, as well if you think that these visualizations you see are not sufficient. Now, there is a lot more outputs that I'm going to take you through in a second over here. But before that, let's run another scenario, which is going to be the testing scenario where, remember, all that we have done or all the demand manager has done is said that there is a potential for the volume of our online channel products to increase significantly by 20% for a few months. Keep your eye out on these bottom panel numbers so we can see there is a particular production amount that is being created as a previous scenario, as well as certain demand outputs. So we can see that our demand output is 87,000 currently. If we now consider the new demand scenario, we can quite quickly start understanding how our demand changes. So now we have to satisfy 88,000 units of demand. Our usage of facilities changes, and it's easy for us to understand which locations could become strategically important for us if this change were to occur. And under the same logic, you can include your supply scenarios as well, combine your demand and supply scenarios to really have a very deep understanding of your business and proactively be prepared for a bunch of different types of uncertainties that could occur in the future for your business. or also, reactively, dynamically run these scenarios when certain changes do occur. Like if a production facility or a line needs to shut down for a few months, how should your entire end-to-end supply chain really adjust to that for you to be able to continuously keep meeting your margins and your targets and so on. So taking a look at some of the other outputs, there is a capacity analysis output, which highlights for you the monthly production volume by plant, the utilization of your resources. Again, much of the same information you saw on the first page, but at a much more detailed level. There's also an inventory analysis, so you could quickly choose a certain line, a certain product, and understand the way that inventory is being calculated for those locations and products. Of course, the tool allows you to model bill of material processes. So you get the bill of materials output as well in terms of what is being produced versus consumed, how is each recipe being utilized as well as a procurement schedule of which raw materials should you get at which month in order to service which customer. The distribution analysis is also quite interesting because it highlights in a map perspective how all the flows in and out of your business and between your different production facilities is behaving. So it gives you a good high-level picture of how the business is functioning. Now, I'd also like to show you the fulfillment analysis, but for that, we need to run one other scenario where we no longer force the model to meet all demand. So let's say if we now start operating within our capacities of warehouses, but at the same time, allow the tool to unfulfilled demand. So in other words, the question we are asking is, what is the best we can do if we work under the limitations of our business? So now we start finding that there are no red lines here, meaning that we're not overutilizing at all since this option is turned off. Each of the locations is either being running at good utilization, which we have predefined as 75%, underutilized, under 75%, or not utilized at all. And of course, the outputs can be visualized once again through this bar chart over here. One other thing you would have noticed that there will be a certain percentage of demand, in fact, 1% of our demand, that is now unfulfilled. Clicking this bottom panel allows you to compare two scenarios quite easily. So in the previous scenario, of course, the demand we are fulfilling is the same because the testing demand scenario is still at play. But now we have a certain difference in the production volume we are producing without the overutilization aspect and a certain amount of demand that we are not able to meet. And this is really where the fulfillment analysis becomes very powerful. So if we hover over to it, what this phase allows you to do is understand the demand that you are not able to meet, as well as prioritize certain demand over the others. So by using this customer group priority or product group priority, we can start understanding that our retail product, we can only meet 96% of that demand, but we can set certain limitations. We could say, well, we have a 98% service level requirement. Or if you have multiple different products, you could give it various levels of priorities to say, okay, I prioritize this product's demand, or in a similar vein, this customer's demand over another one. So by using these levers, you're able to deeply understand the best way in which to fulfill your demand to meet your different service levels. Or even if you don't choose to do that, at least you get an understanding of in order for you to be truly optimal, which products or customers might be worthwhile keeping on the back burner and which ones to put more focus on. Now, the final idea becomes that if we come back to this demand scenario phase, let's assume this previous scenario we would like to save. So we can always go on this bottom page and say, yes, I want to create a new business scenario based on this understanding. And let's say we call this business scenario number 2, as the base scenario is the first scenario. Now, once you have created and saved multiple scenarios, that could be a combination between your demand and supply vulnerabilities, you can bring them all side by side in the fourth phase of the tool to really understand the trade-off of each of them. So we could see, compared to our base scenario and compared to another scenario that I saved, the amount of revenue we're achieving is quite different. The amount of margin that we're able to achieve is also different, because under each of these scenarios, we have a different production plan, different limitations. So of course, the targets and the revenues we achieve will be different. Now, you could also force the application so that every time you optimize, it optimizes for you to achieve your target. So it tells you the best combination of balancing your demand and supply in order to reach a certain target margin. But once you have multiple scenarios compared side by side, you can compare them on either on the demand level, so how much fulfillment are we achieving, on a supply perspective. So in each of these different scenarios, how are our different lines and locations being utilized? How much inventory do we have at the various different lines at different months? Production volume changes between different scenarios, and so on. Fulfillment detail helps you understand from a customer perspective, which customers might you be fulfilling more or less in different scenarios, as well as different financial details, once again, of, the red colors outline where your costs may be higher, where your revenue is higher, transportation cost is higher in the base scenario, for instance, and so on. Finally, the last point I'd like to touch on is the fact that you can create as many scenarios you want and run them simultaneously. So I could say, well, I want to create a new business scenario, which is a combination of allowing overutilization, prioritizing a customer, enabling strict minimum inventory limits, and then hit the optimize button to see the outputs of that particular scenario. So hopefully this gives you a quick glimpse into the tool and helps you understand the workflow, the model logic, the intuitive nature of using it. If you have any further questions, or if you'd like to go into more detail, please feel free to contact your sales representative at AIMMS, who can connect you to the right channels to make this tool a reality for you as well. Thank you for your time.